front of him over each of the stakes I had driven in the ground. And as he walks from now, meanwhile as he's walking, they're just kind of gently swaying back and forth. He steps over him, and as he'd step over each stake, he'd holler up to the guys at the truck, "Clear." He walked over all 15 of my stakes in the ground and said, "Clear." Now, between me and the main house, there was a garage building, and the driveway to the property came in and went to that garage building. And I knew that the water main came into the property somewhere along there, and it probably crossed the driveway to get to the house. So this guy, he goes walking over towards the driveway, and he gets about midway across the driveway. And I'm watching this whole time. I'm about as far away from him as, you know, probably one end to the other of this room we're in. All of a sudden, it looked like almost as if somebody had grabbed the ends of those swing rods, yanked them into an X, and then they bent. They bent, like I could see them bending, literally bending down. And then he took a couple of steps off, and they relaxed, straightened up, and went back to just... Then what he did was he walked in a zigzag fashion, and every time he crossed where the water main came in, he'd get a response. And I could see it. I could see the response, and it was pretty impressive. And just then the owner comes out, and he says, yeah, I think the water main does come in right there. And I'm looking at it. That's fucking interesting. Then he turns to me and says, "You want to try it?" I look at the guys at the truck. Sure, why not? He gives me those swing rods, and I go walking. I stepped across that point, and I felt like I got, you know how you like if you get a strong charge of static electricity? Mm-hmm. That's what it felt like.
I've actually heard of this before.
Yeah, and it felt like somebody grabbed the ends of those rods and swung them into an X. Now, I've tried it since then, and I've gotten a response, but never like that first time. I mean, I don't know, I was caught off guard or something. And maybe it also had something to do with him being there, right? Now, since then, I've known probably half a dozen other people. I gave several lectures to the Appalachian Society of Dowsers back in the 90s, and I got to know a bunch of these people that were like literally like contracting out to you know, building contractors, to other things, literally people who were paying them money. And you know, if you read the scientific literature, you know, oh, it's skeptical, it's they have these tests where statistically there's no indication that there's any greater effect of that. But I totally think it has to do that there's really subjective things going on here. Because, like, first of all, I've tried it a lot since then and gotten mild responses, but never anything like that first time. Where it was shocking. It was actually shocking to me. But after that, I came to believe, yes, there are these energies, and humans can detect them. We know animals detect changes in the geomagnetic field. And why is it so incredible that moving water underground, or moving water in a fault line, or two mineral or crystalline deposits moving into each other couldn't create enough anomalies or fluctuations in the geomagnetic field that they could be detected? And if you have people now, and back, I knew guys, now I wasn't there, but I knew guys, friends of mine, or not friends of mine, but acquaintances of mine that were Marines in Vietnam. And they used dowsers to find landmines. Now, they would not have done, you can look up even online, there's still like photographs online of some of these guys. I heard about it, you know, this was years and years ago. I think I was telling people, somebody, like I had a friend who was my neighbor who was an ex-Marine. And I was telling him this story. He was my neighbor at the time this happened. He said, oh yeah, we had guys in Vietnam that would use those to find underground tunnels, find landmines. And yeah, and I've looked up online since then. You can actually see the pictures of these guys. So, like, my thought was, okay, they would not be using this if it was just all BS. There's something to it. Now, circling around, I think these ancient builders were using something similar to determine, like for example, when they put that pole in the ground, it wasn't just placed randomly. Like for example, you can look at some of the temples, like Chartres Cathedral is a good example, which I highly recommend. Chartres Cathedral. There's a series of fault lines that intersect directly under the holy altar. And you can go down, there's a crypt down below the altar you can go into, and there's a well. And you can see right down into the well, the water table. Now, here's another interesting coincidence. If you take that flagstone pavement, which is the floor when you walk into the cathedral, the height of the vault, it's like roughly around 120 feet above the paving stones of the floor, is the same distance above as the water table is below. Is that a coincidence again? See, these kind of things, you can multiply them over and over and over again, and you get to the point, well, okay, so maybe we should hypothesize that there's a method to this madness. I can't say that I know what it is. I think, maybe we can recover. I mean, what I'm interested in doing is, and there's like I mentioned, Robert Edward Grant and others that I know. I think we're kind of in this phase right now where it's essentially trying to reverse engineer what these peoples of long ago were up to with all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And I ultimately think it's technological.
It's fascinating stuff, isn't it?
Isn't it though?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I got pictures I could pull up and show you right here of my 15 poles. took pictures of it.
We'll get them from you. Put them up on screen. I mean, that brings us into, I think, plasma technology.
Yeah.
Lightning bolt technology.
Yeah.
What is it?
Lightning bolts, that's plasma, ball lightning. The sun is plasma, right? Aurora Borealis, the northern lights, is plasma. It's the fourth state of matter. It's what happens when the electrons and the neutrons become completely disassociated. Solid, liquid, gas, degrees of freedom between electrons and neutrons, right? Even in a gas, there's still bonds. But when you get to plasma, they completely break free. So now you have electrons, neutrons become ions, and because they're electrically charged, they can be influenced by magnetic fields. And they also have this tendency to self-organize under the right conditions. If you apply the right frequency, it's like they spontaneously organize into toroidal forms. And then what happens is that, if you look at a torus in cross-section, it looks like an infinity sign. But picture kind of a donut. Here's what you do. Visualize a sphere with a North Pole and a South Pole. And now let's say you collapse that sphere so that the North Pole and the South Pole meet at the equator. So now you've got this like indentation in the north and the south. Well, what happens?
Cones.
Yeah, like cones. They're like cones, right? Well, what happens, and I'm rudimentary in understanding this, right? But what then happens is that you get this electron or ion, or both, stream that starts cycling down that, what do you want to call it? What did you just call it?
Cone.
A what?
Cone.
Cone.
Like a funnel.
Starts slightly, yeah, perfect. Starts spiraling down that funnel, and as it's spiraling down, it's increasing and increasing in rotational velocity. Now, in the northern hemisphere, say, it's going clockwise, and in the southern, it's going counterclockwise. And they meet at the equatorial plane. And that's where something really interesting happens that I don't understand. But you've got this accelerating rotation, faster and faster, coming down literally to the microscopic level. And then those two whirling vortices meet each other. Something happens there that's almost supernatural. And I can't claim to know what it is, but that's the basis of the plasma technology. And that creates, well, in the machines that are being developed, they work by generating microscopic cavitation bubbles. And then those cavitation bubbles are subject to very rapid vacuum and pressure, because if they're fed into, like, say, a generator or a combustion fossil fuel-based any engine of any kind, where you got pistons moving up and down, the movement down will create a compression phase, and then the moving up will create a vacuum phase. And what will happen is the microscopic bubbles, the cavitation bubbles, collapse on their axes. They form these perfect toruses that now initiate this self-organization process of the plasmoids. And they can now be harvested from that machine that's creating these bubbles. And then they're fed into a series of tubes and cylinders and spheres that are carefully machined to very specific and precise ratios. And it's, for example, one end you've got a sphere with an opening in it, and the plasmas are fed into that under high pressure, and in that sphere they start whirling. And there's a thing that's, and I'm still trying to understand how it works, the Hilch vortex tube, which can actually create two vortices, one whirling one way and then another one inside it whirling the other way. And it can actually separate. You can feed in air at room temperature, and it separates that into a hot and cold end. And that differential can be up to a couple of 100 degrees difference. Again, we can pull up and I can provide you with the graphics and stuff to help understand this. The thunderstorm generator, so-called, works on the same principle. Except what it does is it has a cylinder that's within a cylinder within a cylinder. A sphere within a sphere within a sphere. Now here's where it gets interesting, is because, okay, you feed the plasmas in, they start this whirling. Mm-hmm. And one vortex whirls down one direction, the other is fed in, it whirls in the other direction, and then they're both fed back to where they meet. So you've got this cold and this hot front meeting. That's why it's called a thunderstorm, because it's operating on the same principle as like a cold front and then like cold, what happens? If a cold front meets a hot front or a warm front, and it begins discharging, starts discharging plasmas, right? So this thunderstorm generator can now be hooked up to any kind of internal combustion engine, to a generator, and something really bizarre happens. And I was reluctant to talk about it. You know, I went on Rogan's show with Graham Hancock a year ago last November. And I had already been in contact with Malcolm, one of the preeminent inventors and developers of technological applications of plasmas. I hadn't decided yet whether he was for real or not. But I'd been talking to him distance for over 7 years, and his story never changed. Right? And I took careful note of that, and I began looking at some of the things that he claimed as sources, and they all checked out. Going back to Nikola Tesla, right? Coming up through like half a dozen other researchers that had worked in some capacity trying to develop technologies around this plasma energy, like learning how to contain plasma and then extract energy from it. So then, and I'm not going to get into all the details because it's a pretty wild story, but
I love the details.
I know, but I'm like, okay, so I go on Rogan with Graham Hancock, and Graham invited me to go on with him. We'd been on there before multiple times, and I had, you know, when Graham was researching his books and stuff. In at least one case, I'd been out in the field with him at least a couple of times, guiding him and showing him evidence in the landscape for these tremendous catastrophic events, which he then documents, like in the book Magicians of the Gods. I think there's 2 chapters in there devoted to our travels together and the things that I was showing him. Well, anyways, before we go in, he says, because, Graham has been attacked left and right by the mainstream guys, the archaeological establishment and all. He says, let's not get into talking about ancient technology. Okay, if you don't want to, I'm fine. I'm happy to talk about mass extinctions or giant floods or asteroid impacts or whatever. I'm sure, yeah. Well, then the issue came up of the ancient builders and how they moved 200-ton stones. So Joe is like, well, did they have some technological means? And if you go back and watch that November show from, like, they kind of like both look at me. Well, wait a minute now. Like, I'm thinking, I just said I was not going to talk about that, right? So I was evasive. But Joe, you can like, you'll see, like, I'm trying to not talk about Joe. No, whoa, come on, what do you. So I mentioned that, well, I've been talking to this inventor for about 7 years, and he's been developing these technologies using plasma, and it's frequency-based, right? And at this point, I already knew that the thunderstorm generator, and I'll show you pictures of one now that's been retrofitted on a 300 kilowatt generator on a substation outside of London. And they're testing the damn thing. And it works, does what it's predicted to do, right? I mentioned that he was on an island where he'd gone because there had actually been a couple of attempts on his life. So he was an oil prospector. And he discovered oil in Tasmania, and one of the big oil companies was trying to wrest the license away from him, so they did a whole smear job against him, started paying off journalists and Tasmanian government officials and stuff and trying to create, portray him as a grifter and all this to scare away investors, because they were this company had overstated their reserves by about 30%, and they were going to get in some major trouble. And they did get in major trouble. In 2003, the entire board of this company resigned. And I've double-checked that. Now, one of the things is leading up to this, when I'm still like, okay, should I be believing all of this? Well, before I jump to that, like, so I kind of outed the guy inadvertently, because he had told me that because of what the history of these kind of alternative energies not making it out, he decided he was going to use a different strategy. He was going to open source everything. All of his notes, and he had spent 7 years writing up his notes, several thousand pages of notes and schematics and diagrams. He had patent applications. All of this he was going to open source. And he asked me, because he had no connections, and I had already was building up quite an audience, and he asked me, when he first called me, he told me this, he said, I've been working on this plasma energy, and it's based on frequencies, and these frequencies are connected to these ancient sacred numbers. And he said, I watched a podcast, and it was you giving a lecture, and you were talking about ancient numbers, and the numbers you were mentioning were exactly the numbers that I found made this technology work. For example, the ratios of the spheres have to be in the ratio 4 to 3 to 2. And if they weren't in those proper ratios, you didn't get the effect, right? So he's telling me all of this and said, the reason I'm reaching out to you is because I'm thinking you're probably one of the only people in the world I can talk to about what I'm doing. Well, I'm honored if this is all real. Well, so after I'm on Rogan, I outed him. Now, he was off traveling somewhere, and he got so freaked out, he never went back to his laboratory. He came right over to America. And I was scheduled, now this would have been November, a year ago November. So I also mentioned the car manufacturer Mazda, who had expressed interest in the technology. Now, I don't think they've gone forward with it, but at the time, I didn't realize, because I thought he'd given me the green light. I'm going to open source it, so, you know, I'm going to put it all out there.
Yeah.
Okay, so turns out that he had and his small group of potential investors had signed a non-disclosure agreement with Mazda. And here I am on Joe Rogan, shooting my big mouth off, you know, innocently blabbing away. So, like the next day, within a day or two, I get a call from Roland Perry, who was probably Australia's best-selling author. And he's also an investigative reporter and has some pretty high-level connections with Australian intelligence and so on. I get a call from this guy, and he's telling me, well, you know, you just outed Malcolm, but it's cool. It's going to be okay, because don't get freaked out, you know. So one of the high-ups, a guy who was with a fellow who has a international passport with World Bank, was one of the people who were involved in looking at this technology. I didn't realize this. He had jumped on a flight and immediately went to Japan to do damage control from me shooting my big mouth off. But it turned out okay, I guess, because within a few days their stock went up.
Very interesting.
Yeah. But so he came to America. I had scheduled to go down to do an interview with Tucker Carlson. So I went down to his studio in Florida, Boca Grande, just south of Sarasota. I was in the hotel there, and the inventor shows up, Malcolm, he shows up. So I stayed a few extra days. We went through a lot of stuff. I left, went back to Atlanta. He stayed on. It turned out he went and got a room in a beachfront resort. And it turned out the manager of the place was a Randall Carlson fan. So he gave Malcolm the run of the place. And a lot of it, they had a restaurant and all this there that had closed down during COVID. So he gave Malcolm the keys, said use it for whatever you want. So we set up a little, like a mini podcast studio in there. And we then had an interview with a man by the name of Tom Carpenter, who is the founder of the India Foundation, which is a liaison between the French government and the Indian government. So we had this interview with him. He took this information to the Indian government, and they were very interested in it. So now I'm going to skip some of the details, but fast forward to last summer. Now, okay, so Joe asked me to come back on to talk about the technology. So we agreed that I would come back in February. And then, so I went back on Joe's show, but Malcolm the inventor was here in America, and he came up to Atlanta to tutor me in the technology. So we put together a big slideshow, over 200 slides, which I have right here on mine. And then he gave a series of lectures. As he then went through the slides, he gave lectures on that. And so then I had this invitation to go back on Joe's to talk about the technology. Well, here I had the inventor right here with me, so I contacted Joe and I said, I've got the inventor with me. Do you want to bring him on? He said, sure. So myself, him, George Howard, who I mentioned earlier, runs the Cosmic Tusk website, and so on. He went with a couple of other friends that went with. We drove down there, and I went in there, and myself and Malcolm sat down, and Jamie had found this stuff from the 90s and the early 2000s online, where it goes back to this controversy where they were trying to get the license away from Malcolm.
Interesting.
So it was basically a series of hit pieces that I'd had this conversation with Roland Perry, and he called me, we had this long conversation, And he said, yeah, I spent 4 years investigating Malcolm. So all the stuff he's telling you is real. And I've seen the technology work. Okay, and I knew it was Roland Perry. I mean, he sent me links and, you know, I watched videos that he was on. So that boosted my confidence quite a bit that this was all real. But basically what happened was I had this slideshow we had put together, and this paperwork Jamie puts on. So Joe is looking at this stuff when we just walk in. Now he knows nothing about any of this except what he's seeing is that, you know, trying to portray Malcolm as a religious nut and a bunch of other weird stuff that I'd already seen, you know, and I'd talked about it with Roland Perry, and he said, yeah, this was all part of this smear campaign, just like they've done with Graham Hancock, just like they've done with all these people. You know, you try to discredit them. But the key here is this. Even if all that was true, which it isn't, but even if it was, the technology works. His invention works, okay? So we went on the show, and Joe, you know, saw this stuff and thought, okay, who is this guy that Randall's brought in here? He's a grifter. So it got contentious. And if it ever airs, you'll see me constantly trying to steer the conversation. I've got the slideshow open here. I'm saying, come on, guys, let's look at the science here.
Yeah.
But they were going at each other. And when it was over, we go out, and Joe calls me aside and says, hey. And the thing is by the end of this, I'm thinking, you know, people are going to go, oh, gosh, Randall is, you know, promoting this grifter. He's promoting this con man. And I'm thinking, oh, shit, what, you know, I'm already thinking about the ramifications of this. And I'm going, man, this is going to throw serious upheaval in my life. And then Joe calls me aside as we're going out and he says, hey, okay with you if I sat on this for a while I figure out? And I said, it was like, yeah, sit on as long as you want. And so it never has aired, which is fine with me because it got so off track. And I wanted to stick to the science. Now, I knew at the time, this is February, a year ago last month, I knew that there was a whole series of testing coming up the next summer, which was last summer. And I was present at some of these tests and saw for myself what was happening and was able to, there with an admiral, a retired admiral from the Indian Navy, flew all the way over from India to be there present at this testing. That was at a major industrial laboratory at one of the research labs out in Raleigh, North Carolina. That's all at this point that I can say about it until the final test results are published. But I was there, saw it working, saw 2 generators, a control generator, and one with the technology. I watched as the engineers and the scientists there calibrated them both. And then I was the one who went up and started both generators. They're both in 2 separate rooms. Started the technology on one of the generators, and so we've got readouts. We've got gas analyzers there, probes going up into the exhausts of the generators. We've got a couple of guys there with mass spectrometers hooked up. So we've got multiple ways of determining what's coming out of the exhaust pipes of these 2 generators, right?
Yeah.
I go up there and I flip the switch on the one that has the thunderstorm. I'll call it the thunderstorm, the plasma generating retrofit to it. And we watch. So we got a first read. I can show you actually. I've got a printout of the readouts right here on my computer.
Really?
Yeah, I do. And you can see you've got, it was I think it's called a Kane 5 something because it measures 5 gases. Carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxide, other methane, other hydrocarbons, probably like methane and whatever else, and oxygen. Okay, so flip the technology on. You can sit there, I can watch the mass spectrometer, you can watch the gas analyzer. You're looking at like 10% per parts per million. Let's see. carbon dioxide, and oxygen were in percentages. Methane and nitrogen oxide were in parts per million. So basically, oxygen is like at a 4 or 5% coming out of the exhaust, which is about typical for a generator like that. You got, I think, like 10, 11 was 12% of CO2, CO, etc. So as you're watching it, here's what happens. The carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, methane, hydrocarbons, and nitrogen oxides start going down. Oxygen starts coming up.
Interesting.
CO2 zeroes out. Carbon monoxide zeroes out. The nitrogen oxides go down to just a few parts per million, as does the other hydrocarbons. Oxygen tops out at over 20, I don't remember exactly, between 20 and 21%, which is optimum percentage of oxygen for pure unpolluted air. So what is now coming out of the generator, the generator with the technology, is pure unpolluted air.
No kidding.
No kidding. No
Whoa.
kidding. Yeah. On top of that, what it's doing, it's capturing everything that's coming out, and it's feeding it back into the thunderstorm generator. So at the initial, in order to get the plasma separation to occur, I think you have to get it up to like 700 and some degrees. But once you do that, it's almost, not quite, but almost self-perpetuating. And you just have to replenish the water. Like I forget, however few hundred hours that it runs, you have to replenish the water. And that's it.
Man, and you've seen this.
Oh yeah, I've seen it. And I've known, multiple people now that have seen it. The Admiral, he took it back to India. India is seriously looking at it and as a retrofit for their Navy.
Man.
The industrial, and I can show you this on the computer too. I've got photographs of like the big industrial scale application on the 300 kilowatt Perkins generator on the substation in London. I mean, they're testing it, and they may start retrofitting all of their generators because it doubles to triples the efficiency of these engines.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And you think that they had this back in ancient times?
Some iteration of it, I suspect. And here, it just gets more bizarre as we go on. When you create these vortexes, you start this spiral motion inside the sphere, and then it travels down. So you got an outer cylinder and an inner cylinder. And one vortex is inside the outer, but outside the inner. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Then the next vortex going in the opposite direction, in the opposite spin, is inside the next cylinder.
Okay.
Now, in order to transition from, and again, I can show you this on here, because I got photographs of all the components, how they fit together, videos of them being assembled in the machine shops, right here on this laptop, so you can see it. You can't, like if you have a sphere and you just cut a round hole in it, you stick a cylinder onto it, it's got this like sharp edge, and that would induce turbulence that would affect this coherent, organized vortex that forms. So you have to have a transition between the cylinder and the sphere to prevent that turbulence from being introduced. Experimentation has shown that one angle seems to be optimum for minimizing the introduction of the turbulence. What do you think that angle is?
I don't know.
51.84 degrees. Slope to base of Khufu's pyramid. Another coincidence? I don't know. That leads me to think, okay, I've suspected all along that these pyramids and these structures are part of an ancient technological system. Probably someone along the lines of the principles of Nikola Tesla, right? Who was able to generate energy by setting up some kind of a relationship between the Earth and the ionosphere. I don't know what's going on there. I'm still trying to figure out, listen, I was in kindergarten 2 years ago, now I'm in first grade. But when I was there at this testing, I'm seeing these scientists, physicists and engineers and stuff, they're all scratching their heads. Going, okay, we see this, but they've been struggling for a year now to explain what is actually happening. There's a fellow by the name of Bob Grenier, who I think has probably come as close as anybody. He's head of the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project. Martin Fleischmann was one of the pioneers in these alternative energies, particularly working with plasma. Brilliant mind. He came on board about a year ago. And he was at there was a Tesla Tech conference in last summer in Albuquerque. And my pal and partner in HowTo.com did the live streaming out to, I don't know, a couple of thousand people around the world that paid to be able to witness. And what they did in front of a live audience on a stage is they brought in a generator and retrofitted it right there. And as a result of that, several things happened. From there, it went to this research lab in North Carolina. From there, it went to a conference in Zurich where it was presented. Malcolm then went and spent 2 months in India demonstrating and building prototypes. And so, I mean, this is the phase where it's at now. Let's see, what else?
So they're really looking at this.
What?
People are really paying attention to this.
People are starting to pay attention to this. Yeah, that's exactly right. So, there's a really interesting video that I would recommend watching. It's an interview with the gentleman is named George Lush. He works in high performance metals. He contracts, he's third generation. Their company, I think, was founded in 1951. He's contracts to the aerospace industry and NASA and all of this, these high performance alloys and stuff. And he did the annealing of this thunderstorm generator in England. And there's an interview, like a 20-minute interview with him afterwards, and it's really worth watching because he's like, he says, I'm the biggest skeptic around. And what I saw can't happen. What I saw is impossible, but I saw it. He's there with his, he had a thermal analyzer. And we've got videos of him in there testing as this stream of stuff is moving through these cylinders and pipes and stuff. And literally with 4 inches, the temperature can change by over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And he says, this is impossible. He says, I kept testing and testing and testing with my thermal analyzer, and it came up the same every time. He says, I'm not sure what, he says, we're just at the beginning of trying to figure out what the hell is happening. But then he went in to discuss the potential applications of it. Now, one of the big questions is okay, when you do look at these readouts, okay, carbon dioxide, the other things go down. In some cases, zero out. In other cases, it doesn't zero out entirely, but it's only a small fraction of what it had been. Meanwhile, the oxygen has gone up. So then the question, okay, where did the carbon dioxide go? Where did the carbon monoxide go? Well, it looks like it somehow got transmuted on the atomic level into oxygen. And how bizarre that the concentration of oxygen coming out of the exhaust pipes is the optimum oxygen that we would want for unpolluted, breathable air. And that's what's coming out.
Man, that is...
And George Howard was there. I watched him do this. He got down with his mouth right there and started huffing the plasmoids or whatever coming out, you know, to show, yeah. He did the same thing at the Tesla Tech conference in Albuquerque. We've got it on video, him getting down there and huffing, it's a running joke now. You know, that he got down there and was, and they initially started up the generator on the stage, and once the generator got warmed up, the fumes coming out got so strong that they had to move the generator out onto the loading dock. Then they turned the technology on, and within a few minutes, instead of all this pollutant and stuff coming out, it's air.
Man.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to lay it all on you, Monty. I'll give you the links. You can go and there's a fella in Australia, a young guy doing research named Jordan Collins. He's called.
My nose
His
is so
website's called
itchy.
Alchemical Science. He's done a really great breakdown and analysis of the whole thing, and he's got ideas about what he thinks how it's working. But he's been actually in contact with Roland Perry. There's a video that you can also get. I'll give you the link that you can. It was made about 5 years ago, where they first did a retrofit of a car, retrofitting an internal combustion engine, and Roland Perry is there interviewing the two mechanics who had just completed the retrofit. And it's not a big deal at all. And then he's test driving the car at the end of it. So Jordan Collins, who's also in Australia, goes down and met Roland Perry in the machine shop where they did this, and they're talking about the car. You know, it's been sitting there for a number of years now, but talking about how, you know, what would be involved in retrofitting lots of cars. George Lush, the annealer, the high performance metal guy, he in the end of his interview talks about the potential application. He says, well, think about this: if you put this technology on cars, and you've got billions of cars all over the world, you've got hundreds of thousands of cars driving down city streets, and they're putting out all of this stuff, right? With this technology, they're putting out air.
Yeah.
Putting out air.
That would eliminate fossil fuels.
Almost, but not quite. Fossil fuels would have, but see, at this point they're using fossil fuels to get those initial temperatures to set the whole process in motion. But there's other applications that look like they could be. I mean, some of the stuff that I've seen some of these guys talking about is space travel, submarines, possibly even the conversion of hydrocarbon-based pollution in oceans into protein, which could be very interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know much about that, but that's one of the potential applications that's already been demonstrated to be possible. So, like I said, I'm still in first grade. Maybe I'm about to graduate to second grade, but I've got a lot to learn yet. So, you know, we can carry on this conversation. And if you're interested in keeping up with the developments, man, I'd love to keep you in the loop.
Yeah, I would love to.
It's exciting.
I would love to hear more about it.
Yeah.
On that note, let's take a quick break.
Okay.
Today's show is brought to you by HelixSleep.com. Sleep, especially as you get older, is so critical, especially that deep, comforting sleep. Go to HelixSleep.com and take the sleep quiz. I took it, and I was matched to the Midnight Lux. I've always struggled to get a full night's sleep. After years of operating overseas, some days my back is just absolutely shot. But not anymore. I've had Helix Sleep Mattress for over a year now, and it leaves me feeling refreshed and ready for the day every day. Plus, their enhanced cooling features keep me cool all night long. Helix knows that everyone's unique, so they have several different mattress models to match based on your body type and sleep preferences. Once you match, your mattress comes right to your door, shipped for free. Helix has a 10-year warranty and even has financing options for flexible payment plans. So a great night's sleep is never far away. Helix is offering 20% off all mattress orders and 2 free pillows for our listeners. Go to helixsleep.com/SRS and use the code Helix Partner 20. This is their best offer yet, and it won't last long. With Helix, better sleep starts now. I want to tell you about this business venture I've been on for about the past 7-8 months, and it's finally come to fruition. I've been hell-bent on finding the cleanest functional mushroom supplement on the planet. That all kind of stemmed from the psychedelic treatment I did. Came out of it, got a ton of benefits, haven't had a drop of alcohol in almost 2 years. I'm more in the moment with my family. And that led me down researching the benefits of just everyday functional mushrooms. And I started taking some supplements, I found some coffee replacements, I even repped the brand. And, you know, it got to the point where I just wanted the finest ingredients available, no matter where they come from. And it got to this point where I was just gonna start my own brand. So we started going to trade shows and looking for the finest ingredients, and doing that, I ran into this guy, maybe you've heard of him, his name's Laird Hamilton, and his wife Gabby Reese, and they have an entire line of supplements with all the finest ingredients. And we got to talking, it turns out they have the perfect functional mushroom supplement. It's actually called Performance Mushrooms. And this has everything. It's USDA organic. It's got chaga, cordyceps, lion's mane, maitake. This stuff is amazing for energy balance, for cognition. Look, just being honest, I see a lot of people taking care of their bodies. I do not see a lot of people taking care of their brain. This is the product, guys. And so we got to talking, and our values seemed very aligned. We're both into the functional mushrooms, and after a lot of back and forth, I am now a shareholder in the company. I have a small amount of ownership, and I'm just really proud to be repping and be a part of the company that's making the best functional mushroom supplement on the planet. You can get this stuff at lairdsuperfoods.com. You can use the promo code SRS. That'll get you 20% off these performance mushrooms or anything in the store. They got a ton of good stuff. Once again, that's lairdsuperfoods.com. Use the promo code SRS. That gets you 20% off. You guys are gonna love this stuff, I guarantee it. You've heard me talk about my passion for ketone supplements and how they boost your workouts by helping your body use fatty acids for fuel. I take a shot of HVMN's ketone supplement before my morning workout and before I record my show. It's not an energy drink, but what it does do is it gives me the energy and the clarity that I need to get through my day. I don't drink coffee, so this is my go-to when I need that edge. Ketone IQ comes in convenient shots and are great for workouts or when you need to be in the zone. Some of the world's best athletes rely on this to improve their performance because it doesn't contain sugar or caffeine, but it gives them the same benefits.
Oh wow, insane. Such a cool spot. That brick would get destroyed though. It's already starting to get destroyed. You can see it. A good idea, like bring a coping or something, just to preserve the spot.
Dude! Watch out, Jack.
I was actually so focused. Watch the whole watch this shit.
Right. Oh my god, dude!
This video is an hour long. What is this?
That was crazy.
Come on, man.
Let's go.
Let's see. What?
Let's go.
No way. What the fuck? The wheel, bro? What is this? Why? Come on, really? That was sick. Alright.
Yeah, Lou, that was awesome.
Wow. See the front shove. The front shove up we got.
Yeah,
That's
Lou.
crazy.
How's it going? Okay. Yeah, he's gonna get down. Okay. Okay. He's gonna come down. That was sick. That was sick. Fucking good chauffeur to his spot.
Yeah, dude. That was so sick.
Fuck yeah. That was crazy.
pretty scary.
Fuck yeah.
Alright, he lands it, I'm gonna give him this road.
Ain't nobody tell me that I didn't live my dream to the fullest. You only love that sitting on my board.
Wow. Oh, I was saying. I fucking hate this game in level. I hate everything about it. I'm gonna play this for like maybe like 1 more minute. It's probably last run. Last run of the night. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it. Being you.
Uh.